So as partners, Miss Annie Sophie Perrin. Miss Annie, the stage is all yours. Give a roaring round of applause for Miss Annie.
I think you mentioned 5,000 years or 5,000 BC. Moving to the wallets and the mobile wallets. Actually, mobile wallets is nothing really new. We have mobile wallets for the last 5,000 years. The first such mobile wallet was found in Iceland and contained a number of artifacts that people were wearing with them and obviously mobile. That from then on, nothing really changed for 5,000 years. So yeah, the material of the bag or the wallet changed, the size changed, the format changed, maybe the color, but really nothing happened until the 1990s. So what happened in the 1990s? We had the digital revolution. That was about 30 years ago, and that's when digital transformation meant that we could change the way we were carrying a wallet with us. So what happened is in 1990s you had a company called PayPal. I'm sure you're very familiar with it. It really was the first player in digital money, considered as such. Later on, it's only in 2014 really that Apple launched digital money like the e-wallet. The e-wallet was officially launched by Apple in 2014. So when we're looking at history, really it's been not a very long time since we had e-wallets or digital wallets as we call them. So very recent when we consider 5,000 years of evolution and more of mankind. So what is a digital wallet? I'm sure everybody's using one of them. I'm absolutely certain. I'm sure everybody's got a phone, and in your phone, but not only in your phone, but in your phone you'll find applications that contains a number of items, and that plays the role of a digital wallet, which is very mobile, as long as you keep your phone with you. So what is it? The digital wallet is considered as a system that securely is going to store all your user payments information and passwords. So it's a payment method stored for credit cards. So it's going to store all your credit cards in there. And if you press on a button, you see the card appearing without its full number. The number in itself is not stored in the digital wallet. What else? You can have identification documentation, such as your Emirates ID, so your UAE pass. You can have as well, if you have a healthcare insurance card, you can put it in there as well. The wallet also contains not only money, obviously, but also it can help with your financial planning, because more and more digital providers of wallet offers actually a number of functionalities that can help you with planning for your money and making payments, future payments, later payments, and planning for your various outflows of money. They have also loyalty cards in there, store cards. I'm sure you must be using it very much for your boarding passes with any of your airplane. So you can store as well your boarding pass with Emirates, but also obviously your tickets to events. So lots of functionalities that previously were taking a lot of space in your purse or in your pockets. Lots of bits and plastics everywhere that you could lose easily, that you could get stolen or lost. So a number of features now just in a simple mobile phone, which makes everybody's life easier and making the user's life easier. All you need to do is actually to find, is to work with the digital way. So you need to find a point of sale which is compatible, and all you need to do is just tap pay by tapping your phone. The phone will prompt usually common to put a password or digital print, so biometrics using. secure the payment, and you have actually to authorize every single payment. So it's not like somebody can steal your phone and make payments with it without further security. So moving on to the benefits of the digital wallet. Obviously, it's flexible and mobile, because then there's a number of stores now developing applications for online shopping and specific applications for phones. You can shop anywhere you are, every time, every hour of the day or the night. It's much more secure for the reasons that I've mentioned before. The way the digital wallet work is that they do not store the information on the mobile phone or in the app itself. So, and the encryption mechanism exists to make the transactions. So it's actually much more secure than holding a purse or holding some credit cards in plastic form. There's an easy use of reward systems, offers, discounts. So that's very, very good as well for the users. They can enjoy much more reward systems and offers. You can load money any time, anywhere you are. That's very convenient. Also depending on the technology behind, but you can also send and receive money even from a mobile phone to another mobile phone. That is very easy, it's very quick. Mostly, it's sometimes completely free. So that's another blow to and banks and others. There are also, you can withdraw cash at the ATMs. I don't know if you were aware of that, but that's also a feature of the digital wallets. For users, you can also split bills at restaurants. You can make, as I said before, preset payment dates, so that's helping with your planning, your financial planning requirements. And you've got EMA and budgeting functionalities. And I'm sure it's only the beginning, there will be more functionalities. We've seen Danny presenting its innovating bank, digital bank. I'm sure there will be more innovation in that space as well in the future. So that's only the beginning, but you can already see the benefits. You can already see the benefits of a digital wallet compared to a traditional wallet. So the winners are who? The winners are obviously the users. But not only, I mean, the users definitely, the merchants as well, because for the merchants, it's much more secure as well. And also, it's very convenient for the brands, because as you can see, this is a way for the brands to reach the customers directly. So they can issue some offers, they can issue some discounts, they can issue some promotions and offers, so they are able to push to the customer. So I believe there will be more and more MI and also AI to actually push very directed marketing and offers to the consumers, to the users in the future. This is we only at the beginning here. So what else? Really, that's pretty much for the benefits. Now to the challenges. So the challenges, well, the availability and the geographic coverage. Obviously, you need to have a digital network. You need to have compatible point of sales. So compatible point of sales means you also need to have some kind of magnetic secure transmission most of the time. To be able to complete the transaction. There is a part of trust as well, but I think this is very much changing. Danny mentioned earlier that, about the millennials, and there is also Generation Z, which is just behind the millennials. But more and more, these generations are less and less impressed with the traditional banks and the traditional players in the financial system. And they are very keen to actually deal with the new players, the new giant techs, etc., etc. And I think this challenge actually is dramatically changing with these new generations. I was reading an article, I think it was from McKinsey, a study from McKinsey that says 70% of millennials would rather deal with their dentist than speak to their bank. That's saying a lot. You still need to carry your device though. So it's mobile, but you don't want to lose your phone, or you don't want to leave your phone at home, because then you're left with absolutely nothing, unless you carry as well a bag like I do, with all my cards in there, just in case I forget my phone somewhere. And it's not good if you are phone addict, or if you suffer from nomophobia, so the fear of losing your phone or not being able to have a phone with you, then that might actually increase the symptoms. So I don't know if there are some of you that already have this condition, but yeah, it might be one of the side effects, or increasing the phobia. It's still not really 100% secure, even though a huge amount of improvement has been made on security, and I'm sure there will be further innovations and developments in that space. And well, it can help with your financial planning, but a lot of detractors or skeptics, I should say, for these digital wallets will tell you as well that it promotes reckless spending, because actually you're not anymore aware of what you spend. It happens at the click of your phone. You put it on you tap your phone on a POS and it happens. So there probably need to be better ways of alerting the users of their spending habits, and I'm sure Danny alluded to this earlier, is like not making the customer and the user unhappy by discovering that you spend way too much money. Will be probably some functionalities and features that will come up in the future. So moving on to the digital revolution. So we've seen that it started to happen in the 1990s. Remember, this is digital wallets, fintech to the masses. These are the numbers, and they are quite staggering. The number of mobile wallet users is growing by 140 million per year. By 2021, we will have 4.9 trillion US dollars of transactions, worth of transactions. And it's expected to represent globally 18% of total sales. So this is worldwide e-commerce numbers. According to FinTech News, the mobile e-wallets account for a staggering 36% of China's total point-of-sale transactions. 36%, this is more than a third of all transactions. This is massive. China is in the lead pack, and the next slide will definitely show that as well, again. What has facilitated the digital revolution has definitely facilitated the adoption of digital wallets. Without it, it's not possible, and we're going to continue to see a huge increase year on year. I mean, by the rate of 140 million per year, we're going to reach 6.5 in 2023, and as you see, the percentage of total sales made in the digital way of e-commerce is only going to go further and take basically get bigger now than the traditional sales. So it's going to overtake the traditional sales ways of purchasing. So going to the next slide, and this is going to be interesting. So these are the drivers and basically the users. So we've got consumers with different behaviors. Again, Danny mentioned that. So Generation Y, the millennials, and Generation Z, they are obviously the fastest adopters and eager to use new technologies. And this is going to be really getting more and more. This is contributing to the faster pace of the digital wallets adoption and increase in usage. Obviously, what we would say is that we talked about the trust factor, and having said that, going back to this trust factor, I think the trust and satisfaction of the new generation is going to make these digital wallets much more adopted, greatly adopted, and to the masses. We're talking about Generation Y and Z. If you look at Africa, 60% of the population, sub-Saharan population, is below 25. So we're talking not even generation millennial, generation Y, we're talking about generation Z here. 60% of the people. And they are actually going to become, Y and Z are going to become the highest wealth and purchasing power in this world in a very short amount of time. So we are really talking about massive adoption and massive increase in the growth and the proportion of e-commerce compared to normal sales in the retail space. All of that to say that if we, according to a McKinsey report again, 68% of the millennials are open to alternative providers like Amazon, Google, or Apple than the traditional players. 68%. That's quite massive. So yes, the banks have quite a lot of worry to have with the coming generations. Fintech to the masses. So we're looking at now geographically, and I think the new generations, obviously there might be some differences in behaviors and profile, but largely you can see that China is driving the pack. China is at 36%, which is actually huge. We talked about that number before. Behind it you have India. I think India represents, you can't see it very well here, India represents 6%, which is the same as the UAE. And then the rest of the world is quite behind if you're looking at it. So the mobile wallets are largely driven by the China and India of this world. Now, China and India, in combination, represent 2.7 billion people out of about 7 billion in total, a bit more than 7 billion in total. That's 35% of the world population. The difference between China and India is that China is an aging population. So I'm expecting, and I would be surprised if India and some other countries in the world, which have a growth in the or proportion of the younger generations, are not actually going to catch up fairly quickly with China. But the big difference between China and some other countries is that China has got some tech giants. And the tech giants, again, and also the telco of this world, are those which are, contrary to the banks and the traditional players, are those which are also making that possible. And we're going to see that further. Now, there is something, we're talking about fintech to the masses. That's great, China, 36%, India, massive population as well, 6% mobile digital wallet users. But I mean, is there something that is not? Is there something that is really striking here on this map? I'm going to make an analogy. I don't know if you've seen some of the photograph from out of space onto the globe, onto our planet by night. I don't know if anybody has seen any of these photographs. Okay, yes. So what is striking? Yeah, exactly. So Africa, in Africa, actually, when you look at the map, it's sort of black hole. You've got very, very few bright spots, which are basically along the Nile, in Nigeria, around Lagos, in South Africa, and a bit Nairobi, but that is about it. Otherwise, the rest looks completely black. And so do you have any ideas of how many billions of people in total we can find in Africa? 1.2 billion people. So when we say fintech to the masses, yes, of course,
fintech to the masses, but not all the masses. 1.2 billion in Africa is a huge market. These are younger generations which are eager to adopt new technologies, and actually they're very frustrated. They are extremely frustrated because they can't get a hold of this new technology. I'm going to give you a few numbers, and I'd like you to guess what these represent. I'll throw the numbers now. Burkina Faso, 26%. Central African Republic, 30%. Democratic Republic of Congo, 19%. Nigeria, 60%. South Africa, 85%. China, 100%. Can you guess what these numbers represent? Exactly. Electricity. China, according to the World Bank, China population, 100% of China's population has access to electricity. 19% in Congo, in the DRC. So that explains why the adoption rate is not so great in Africa, even though you've got 1.2 billion people, 60% of which are under 25 years old. So what's happening there? What's happening in Africa? And obviously, to operate a digital wallet, you need at least two things, right? You need electricity, and you need a digital network. Mobile network, digital network, as a minimum. Africa doesn't have, I mean, as I just highlighted, Africa doesn't have most of the population, actually not most, but 600 million out of 1.2 billion people. So about 50% of the population in Africa doesn't have access on a continuous basis to electricity. 50%. That's massive. That is absolutely massive. Now, recently, I was recently, actually last year, I was in Africa in a few countries, and the governments in these countries are absolutely aware of the need to step up the investment in electricity, in energy, and also in the digital network. Last year in September, the newly elected president of the DRC has launched a massive national digital transformation program over 5 years. But it starts with electricity. If you don't have electricity, there's nothing you can do, even to operate a network. So you need a minimum of electricity, and there is a massive amount of investments that is going to go into energy generation, but also the cable network, the fiber optic, and all of the mobile telephony network as well. So there's a huge amount of development happening in Africa, and I hope, and I'm sure as well, this decade is going to see a massive uplift in Africa. And I hope that for the country and for the 600 million people or the 1.2 billion people that are really waiting for that to happen. This is going to also increase financial inclusion. I mean, there was a session this morning on financial inclusion. I think there was a panel this morning talking about that. Again, this is going to open up. The digital wallet is just one feature. It's important for sure. But in Burkina Faso, 39% of people do not have access to the financial system. In the DRC, it's more than 25 million people who are still, as Danny was showing, putting money under their mattress. 25 million out of 90 million people in the DRC. That's massive as well. That's more than 30%. So the only other, I would say, constraint is Africa does not really have, like China, one of these star tech giants that are really the enablers for the adoption of, digital money, digital banking, and anything related to it. Hopefully, there will be partnership, and there are partnerships happening between, the big tech companies, the telco companies, and the African development funds and the African governments to actually try and promote and fast track some of these investments. So hopefully, we should be seeing something happening in this decade. Then the disruptors, as previously, we know I think there's a lot of innovation in that area, but if we're looking at what people use to operate their digital wallet, these are not the banks, because as Danny highlighted, they push products, they don't understand the customers, they're not customer-centric. And actually, when you look at any kind of traditional player in an industry which has tried to move onto the digital, it's pretty much a disaster. I mean, I'm not going to say, but Carrefour, go onto Carrefour online and you're going to see why, it's not just, I'm not just going to use technology to do the same thing as I'm doing in a store. It's a totally different business. And I think a lot of players have not realized that. They need to start from scratch. And that's why some of the banks, like Emirates NBD, have chosen to actually completely separate it and actually hire people who are probably very different in profile than the traditional banker. Because to innovate, you need some different mindset. So the telcos of this world are there, obviously. Airtel Money Wallet is very present in Africa, as well as M-Pesa. So they have large network. They're not only African. Airtel is actually an Indian-based company. There are many players proliferating in Africa. I mean, sometimes you go into shops and you've got about 10 or 12 different ways of payment. There are actually too many players probably in that space. And then you've got the traditional tech companies such as Samsung, Apple, and the others. Alibaba, again, finding these guys as well here. So I think Irina earlier, when she asked Danny the question, she said, "Yeah, of course, behind the scene, it's not as simple as that. I can send you, I can transfer to you some money just between mobile phones, but actually behind the scene, the infrastructure still looks like a spaghetti diagram, and the traditional players are still there, of course, because ultimately the banks, there will be movement of money with the banks. The feature is that the banks are getting more and more removed from the transaction. So for instance, when you pay with the telco company, with a telco company app, you're going to pay with your wallet, which is held by, on your mobile phone, with your mobile wallet, which is not the wallet that you have with the credit card company. It's pay the RTA. I don't know if you pay the RTA here with to pay your parking, but it's coming out of my account on Virgin. Of course, I have to replenish the account on Virgin from my bank account, but that means the banks are getting more and more distanced from the transactions. Meaning as well that the banks are going to lose the battle to get critical information on the transactions. And I don't think they realize that. These companies, they're data companies. That's what happens, and that's what matters to them. They are data companies. And with data, you can do a lot of things. So banks, the traditional players are, of course, still part of the game. You've got the telcos, you have also some new players, and the traditional players are still there. You still have the Western Unions, the MoneyGram, the UAE Exchange, and you have some fintechs which have been also playing in that space. TransferWise, Remitly, Zoom, Cellulant, all of these are the new players into that ecosystem. So we're going to see a lot of change, and obviously the regulator. This is actually very interesting, and what's happening in Africa is interesting because some of these players are becoming so important, and as you know, they're not necessarily very regulated, not regulated sometimes at all. It will be interesting to see what's happening in the future in terms of regulation, because there's a lot of transactions happening now within that ecosystem, and I would be surprised if the regulator doesn't wake up at some point and say, oh, wow, they are becoming, as a whole, a systemic risk, possibly. So we'll probably watch that, and the next phases of potential increased regulation, or at least increase in terms of scope of who falls under the regulation, one way or another. So simple yet still complex. Again, referring to the previous presentation, it doesn't matter actually what's happening behind the scene, but as long as it's simple to use for the user, efficiency, convenience, that's actually what matters now to the consumer. So I had a video to show you, and this is really opening up and hopefully thought-provoking, but as we saw, one of the weaknesses is of a mobile phone or a device or a credit card is still that it's something that you have to carry with you, right? I mean, the mobile phone, it has to be charged on top of that. I mean, you don't need to charge your credit card. It should work without electricity, as long as the post has got electricity. But you still need to carry a device with you. So actually, what's next? So I'm not going to be able to play for you the video because I don't think I can play a video. I asked, but apparently I can't play the video for you. But let me tell you a little bit more about this video. The link is down there. It's on YouTube. It's a company called TUI in Sweden who's decided to offer to its employees to enroll into a program which basically put one of these little devices here in your hand. And what happens is that you can pay, you can open doors, you can check into your office, you can unlock your computer, you can do everything with this little device in your skin, under your skin. That's going to be very interesting to see what functionalities, what features this is going to have in the future. But that's probably the next stage for mobile banking and digital wallet. It's going to be your hand. Thank you very much. Any questions? Irina?
Thanks so much. Great presentation, by the way. Although I have a lot of questions, I know we're out of time, so I'll just gonna go right to the last one. So completely agree with you, and I'm actually writing a paper on what's next and the chip technology. So this is not going to be a product, this is going to be a channel, right? The very new channel. And I think there's a lot of controversy, the sides between the MIT and Berkeley and all the other one. What are the ethical part of it and what are the downside? If we are hacking into the phone and it's very simple, what if you hack to that? And there's already sports Olympics actually in London. There was a big scandal that similar devices right now, they're even smaller, they can manipulate your mind and your physical activity, and it was proven to be from the distance of 2 miles. So when we are going into jurisdictions like Africa, it is increasing a transparency and safety when something you don't have to carry and people not easily been taken away. But what we're looking at the physical side, when somebody wants to take it out and still utilize it, then it introduces many different risks we don't want to be talking about. So I think if we are going to that direction, and a lot of conferences like Money 2020, Cybersys and such already promoting this type of activity, and in the US, a lot of companies already mandate you to be chipped in order to work for those companies. We need to ensure as a society we put a very robust framework to ensure there is a safety net on the back of it, and you can actually protect yourself against the devices like that when they're unethically used. So I think, I've read your bio, and we worked with Standard Chartered before. What are you seeing throughout Africa from the adoption of the devices? Do you see it's being widespread, and then people actually open-minded? Is there any educational tools to allow people to know what are the upside but also the downside?
Thank you very much for your question. Like any technology innovation or innovation, generally speaking, you can use it for good reasons and you could use it for bad reasons or bad objectives. What I think, and with any technology innovation, you're going to need strong governance in place. So ethics, strong code of ethics in place, and really make sure that the intent and the intent and the purpose is really, of a good basis. What I think is when you're looking at China, which is already having a program and actually rates every citizen according to their good behavior, I think this is going to be the next stage where some populations, and depending on the regimes that they are under, will probably force the populations and every citizen to wear one of these chips. And with that comes a number of, obviously, of challenges. Are we in a freedom society, and our willingness or not? Are we going to be as free as we think? Are we going to be freer tomorrow than today, or the other way around? I don't know. But what I know as well is that, at least in China, I'm saying China, maybe I shouldn't be there, Chinese in the room. Probably not, actually, because of the travel ban. But I think it could be as well that the population is not forced, but is not, like in some countries they could be, but is actually highly motivated to do so. Because think about it, when you have such a device, insurance company, health insurance company are going to be extremely excited about that idea because it can actually monitor. You don't know what's in this device. So with the upgrade, you have upgrades on your phone, on your systems. When there is a new upgrade of the software that impacts the chips, you don't know what they're going to monitor tomorrow. So they could monitor your heart rate, if you have smoked something, if you have drunk too much, and then suddenly your insurance premium is going to be going rocket up, or they might even say to you, sorry, but we don't want to insure you anymore. This is the risk. This is really the challenge that we're going to be facing as a civilization, is how do we protect ourselves from the misusage of such devices and such technology, and where are the limits? What limits do we want to set? And I think this might differ very much country from country. We will see, but unfortunately there are markets, and the African continent could be one of them, where a lot of pilot programs could be run. It's like similar to what the big pharma is doing with vaccinations and all of that in these countries. I hope it's not going to be the case, but we'll see. The other aspect is that consumer is also consumers' responsibility, and I would say, it's always a challenge and a balance between convenience and what the trade-off against convenience. If you are ready to give up your data, to the Facebook and the other media, social media channels of this world, against convenience, and it's your choice at the end of the day. It's your choice as long as you understand the terms and conditions, and you don't have to scroll through 15 pages on your mobile phone to understand exactly what is Facebook, what is Google is doing with my data, and what data are they capturing. You'll be surprised of seeing the history there. But if you want to know where you were a year ago, at that time, you just ask Google. You'll know. It's extraordinary what they had on us. So it's a transparency, it's the consumer agreement, but the consumer also has a big responsibility in that. Did I answer your question, or it wasn't very much a question? It's Yeah, but similar, like we use drones. We use drones to operate military attacks when we should maybe use drones to identify poachers that are massacring the elephants for ivory trade, right? And we don't do it. And we have the technology to do it. So why are we not using it for the right purposes? So, but yeah, you're right. Any other questions?